Ladies and gentlemen, we're here. New episode. Welcome to In the Bag. How are you doing today, Brad?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's been a fun week, but a sad week. It's been a little lonely over at the warehouse. So we got a bunch of guys out for school. Jason's been gone on vacation with his family, well earned. It's been a little lonely. It's going to be good to get back to normal next week. But had a good week, got a lot of stuff done, and really excited for this week's episode. To be honest with you, I know we kind of had, full disclosure, we have to pivot sometimes here on this podcast,
Yeah.
and this is an episode we were planning on doing anyway, so we're just bringing it to you now. Thank you for everyone who commented and left all your feedback on last week's episode, kind of our 2023 recap episode, and a lot of great stuff in there. Thank you for all the support as always, and a lot of great ideas came out of there. And we ask you, and the people have spoken. You do want to see um, a few one-off episodes of me like just getting better over 2024. The two proposed names are this for the series are Breaking Brad and Get Better Brad. So, comment below.
So we have an inkling of which one you're going to pick, but here's how we want to do it. We want two lucky of you, because I think for some reason people get really excited. I see this culture elsewhere in social media, Brad, of like people are like, wow. I saw someone, they commented on a video and they were like, wow, this comment has gotten more attention than my parents have given me in the last 10 years. And because it had like thousands of likes or something like that. And while that's really dark, everybody, I did audibly chuckle when I saw that. And so that probably makes me a bad person. But once again, full transparency here. So if someone will, when you're watching this on YouTube, first people to get here, someone run down right now to the comments and you're going to type Get Better Brad. And then another person going to come into the comments and be like, I'm going to type Breaking Brad. And then when you go through, you'll see those two comments rise to the top. So give them a like. And I know that people will do this incorrectly, and that's okay. We still love you. Mm-hmm. So we'll be going through and tallying up all the people that had positive votes for each of them, because we're guaranteed to get repeat votes.
Yeah, love it. But yeah, so that'll be fun. That's kind of what the road we're gonna go down today. I think the first step of this is like, hey, it's a new year. A lot of changes have come in my bag, probably in the last 6 months. We've talked about off camera, Robbie. And so what we're going to do, we're going to call this episode 1 of whatever that series title is going to be. And we're going to take a look at my bag, and then Robbie is going to look through it with me. We're going to talk about like some good things that are happening in it, and then maybe some things we're looking for as far as like change and I think one comment on the last episode was like, I'd love to know what things do we need to, what does a 900 player need to be able to do? I think that we'll come to that in another episode, but I think the first step is probably making sure your bag is aligned and you're set up for success before you go out and start doing field work and putting and doing the drilling and like playing the tournaments. I think the bag's got to make sense first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's kind of one of the hearts of the podcast, right? Is if we want to succeed when we head out to the course, we have to make sure that we're set up for success before you even get out there. And there are loads of players that get frustrated on why they have the skills, the physical skills to compete, and yet they get on the course and can't seem to put anything together. And it's like, oh, well, that's because when you're looking at one of the most standard shots in the game, give me a 250-foot straight shot. What are you throwing on that line? And then they look at their bag and they're like, oh, I have 4 discs in that slot. It just depends on the day. Well, if we're walking into courses, I'll go ahead and tell you, I don't think it's a pet peeve of mine, but when I hear someone say something like that to me, I'm always like, if you told me that you have discs in your bag that overlap, and yet they depend on the day, I have thoughts in how well you consistently score. And once again, naysayers are going to jump in the comments and be like, well, I score well all the time. I'm super proud of you. I think you're an anomaly. Because I know lots of people do that. And if I just imagine, Brad, like if someone decided, if LeBron James was like, all right, so I've got these 2 jump shots that I really like. I'm pretty great at both of them. I'm LeBron James. But you know what? Some days, even though they accomplish the same thing, some days when I lean in, I like to just shoot with my right hand dominant. And the other days I like shoot my left hand dominant. And to me, I just kind of see which one's doing better that day.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely not the case. And I think even looking at someone's bag like Brody, who's touring, who's serious, who's, you know, definitely a great player. Every time we dig into his bag, I'm always surprised on how simple it is. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Because
No.
I think in my mind, my naive mind before like really starting to think about all this, a year ago, it's like, oh well, they're pros. They can throw all different kinds of discs. They're gonna have tons of like not only tons of molds, but like tons of like weird runs and things like that. And it's really, and at least in Brody's case, and I think some of the other pros and like uh serious amateurs I talk to, like they don't have like a ton of variation. They found kind of what's worked for them, and then they just kind of lean into that. And I think that's kind of where I am. I've like really just my bag's complete. Robbie can see it right now in front of him. Thanks Disc RPM for that. It's cool because I went in right before this episode and put a bunch of stock pictures in and just built my bag right in front of him. It took like what 4 minutes.
Yeah.
It was very easy. So shout out to Disc RPM for that. Um, but Robbie, just looking at my bag, it's very different than it once. I mean,
Yeah.
from episode one, it's very different, but also just I mean, even from the last time I looked at it, mid last year, it's very different. There's definitely some overlap. There's definitely some places you can probably see I'm experimenting and finding what I like and what I don't like, but it's definitely left me like I think making bad choices on the course and maybe making bad disc choices and really not. And I think one of the big things is like not really being super comfortable with most of them because I'm changing what I'm trying to do with them so much.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the concept here for today.
Yeah. And I think it's a good start for anyone going through this process, understanding if we're switching out a disc, if we're adding new discs to the bag, in theory, m- most often that's going to be uncomfortable because change is always uncomfortable for anyone
Hmm.
and anyone, anything in life. Change is never supposed to be, or yeah, it's different, and different most often feels weird,
Hmm.
things like that. So I look at as a, I did on my channel recently. So I've pulled destroyers and race out of my bag
Hmm.
and I put Raiders in. Now I've thrown Raiders in the past. I probably have 4 or 5 months under my belt of throwing Raiders as my primary distance driver, but that was years ago.
Hmm.
So even when I did a video comparing them, I was like, okay, these Raiders are somewhat new, but I remember throwing them way back when, and I just decided to not get rid of all of them. So I had these Raiders and I'm trying, and I even said in the video, no matter how much, even if these Raiders felt more comfortable, if
Hmm.
I liked them more because they are different than what I've been throwing in this distance driver slot, I wouldn't be shocked if it's a close race, just because I know how these others fly.
Hmm.
Like I see you got a purple envy in the bag. If that isn't the envy that we all know that it's your envy, not
It's not.
envy, then while it still feels hand feel wise, you probably could still accomplish more. You in your mind, you could
Hmm.
accomplish more because you had so much confidence with the prior one, even if this disc actually does fly better for you right now. So there's
Right.
this awkward learning curve of we have to when we're making changes to our bag and things like that, we have to be okay to take a step back. What may even feel like a step back and not actually be a step back in
Hmm.
terms of your ability to execute right off the bat because something's different.
Yeah. No, I think that, and that's kind of where I am too. I'm just kind of leaning into some things like, I don't want to get too far ahead and jump into the bag, but the Evader, for example, it wasn't like it's maybe not the most comfortable feel in my hand per
Mm,
se, but it is doing exactly what I wanted that slot to do that I really couldn't find many other discs to do, and I'm getting the distance and like the flight out of it that I think is intended for that disc, and it just is. You can probably see in my bag too. There's like kind of like there's not a lot around that disc, so I'm leaning on that disc heavily for that slot just because it can do so much for me. So,
yeah.
and I'm switching between I don't know, I'm kinda landing probably somewhere in the middle, and I've mentioned this probably the last couple episodes, but I used to be like, "Okay, I want a disc for every single tiny flight difference in, one category." So, like, mid-ranges, for example, I would have, like, 7 different mid-ranges, they all flew slightly differently, slightly less stable or more overstable, and then instead of, like, be, manipulating my like angle a little bit more or my release angle, I would just like, okay, I'm gonna throw everything as flat as I can and just hope that it does what it's supposed to do. Now I'm kind of going back to, and I'm not going like super minimalist either, but I'm like, let's just iron out like a handful of them, make sure I have most of those shots covered, but I'm leaving more gaps in between those discs now and kind of relying on manipulating angles a little bit or, just better shot selection maybe,
Mm.
um, to like really fill in those gaps for me rather than carrying a ton of mid ranges, for example.
Yeah. No, I think that's very wise. Having that you can min max it, you can adjust accordingly.
Hmm.
Oh, it's two valid strategies. It's the two ends of the spectrum. Is the like yeah, you are not far off by any means. So let's dive on in if you're ready, Brad.
Yeah, let's do it.
And the cool part is for those of you watching,
Hmm.
Brad mentioned this with Disc RPM, but I just once again I think it's a really cool feature. If I reached out to you and you're in the comments and you're listening, and I was like, oh hey, uh, Paul, we want you to come on the podcast. It doesn't take you long to put it all in there, and people can come look at you inside the In the Bag podcast community, which is fantastic.
Hmm.
But like Brad threw it all in there, so by the time y'all are seeing this bag is going to look completely different because all of his actual pictures of the discs are going to be in there. So pardon me if I end up saying wrong colors or whatever it may be.
Hmm.
So uh, you're a butter boy now. You
Butter
are.
boy.
We're putting with the butters. Do y'all have
So
a
here we
stat?
go.
I know, but little behind the scenes, everybody. So Jason and Brad have this like rolling shelf inside the warehouse where
Hmm.
they had both been using. There was half of them were blue bonnets and half of them were roaches.
Roaches. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, we
So
had
are y'all
those.
slowly transitioning?
Yes, yeah, it's already happened. It's and Nate has his on there too. So there's like wizards and butters and fudges. So yep, our transition has already started.
I love it. So how's the putting feeling with the butter so far?
The butter feels good. I mean, I feel like I kind of have that confidence I had with the roach. Um, it's a similar profile, like it's a little bit deeper. So the thing I am trying to like work on and pay attention to is like what are my fingers doing when I'm releasing?
Mm.
And I just because with the roach it was just kind of a dart. I could just not a dart. It was like a
Ooh,
yeah, yeah,
little slip, little
little
slip.
slip. It wasn't a it was just like a straight line kind of thing. I could just really push putt, mostly push putt the roach and just kind of get it there. With the inner core, when I was putting with the inner cores, I had to like focus on giving it a little bit more spin, a little more pop to get there.
Mm.
And then now with the butter, I'm kind of it's almost like in between. So I'm kind of just feeling that out on like where and kind of in like in a new putter, I'm like really figuring out like where's my hand position. I'm kind of putting more like this kind of thing. Whereas I would probably putt more like this or something before, but I'm really trying to focus on like an anchor point,
Mm.
just coming from my archery days here, and then be consistent. And the butter, even though it's a 2301, it is really straight, at least for me. So I have to really I'm changing my aiming point too. So I'm just trying to get like dead center basket now or like slightly right. Um whereas like the roach was I had to hang it out a little farther right. So
Mm.
I'm just, but it's going well. Like it feels good and I feel like I can get to the place where I can be confident with it, sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
So good choice, patron. Hyzer Club members, thank you for that. Thanks for not, destroying me for a year. I
yeah.
appreciate it.
I'm not giving you banger GTS.
Yeah, Banger GT is a bad choice. Bad choice.
No, that's tough look.
Yeah.
Tough look. But you mentioned putting with inner cores, so you've moved one of the baseline inner cores is still
Hmm.
in the bag. Um, what's it doing for you?
So this is my really understable throwing putter. Um, this is one I can throw on like a little baby hyzer to flip up and like just keep turning,
Hmm.
which is something and again, I'm rethinking a lot of shots, like where I would be like, oh, I'm just going to jam like a zone forehand out there. And I'm like, well, maybe I can give it this like a nose up, like turning inner core shot and have better results at the end. I'm not going to skip. I'm not going to, whatever. So, that's like some of these understable shots I'm really trying to work on. And this inner core has been really helpful with that. I've always liked it for that flight. So it's just kind of living in that spot. I used to have a really, really beat up, almost unrecognizable envy in that spot, and I lost it, and I was heartbroken. And again, I want to be able to grab some stuff off the shelf rather than have like these cryptid discs. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah,
felt like this was a really good option for that flight that I was looking. Because even a proxy, I'm gonna have to beat in quite a while to like get it to do that for me. And this just kind of already does it. So that's where that's kind of living, and I'm just trying to work on that shot.
I love it. So another disc that when I think of this disc, I would think based on the one man that I know that throws it, I would think this disc could eventually be a premium plastic version that's
Mhm.
going to slot into that. At least if the one you have is premium. I'm not sure. I know you can't show the stamp on it, but
It
is it
is.
diamond?
Yes, it's some special blend. They actually did this special blend for us.
Oh, sick. Okay.
Yeah,
So is it premium?
yeah. So I'll show the back.
Yeah.
I can't show the front. It's going to be in this month's subscription box, and I can't spoil it. Not yet,
Yeah.
but
But you can,
it is the shaman. It is
yeah,
the shaman.
which means
So
you guys can probably get some hints as to what the theme might be.
mhm. Yeah, there's your hint. There's your
Crazy
hint.
discs only one person likes.
Yeah, right. Well,
That's
and
the theme.
here's the thing. I took this out. I've seen Connor throw the shaman a ton,
Yeah.
and I really love the way it flies. And I think everybody kind of like just matches to some discs, and they just like work well for them. Just their style, their throwing, all that. And I was like, well, since um since we have some, I'm gonna try them now. And I took it on through, and I really loved it. It's one I could throw pretty hard with a little baby hyzer, and just kind of flips up the flat, and either goes like very straight or it goes very straight with like a little bit of turn. So it's like kind of that really, really neutral throwing putter slot.
Mm,
Again, I haven't thrown it a ton yet, but to your point, I think it lives in that like I really want that straight 250-foot shot. Like, what can I trust to do that? Sometimes with a mid range, I feel like I have to back off power a little bit if I want to like go only 250. And when I start like changing my power on some of these discs, that's when I kind of get myself in a little bit of trouble.
mm,
Again, that's a skill I need to have, but for the time being, the shaman is like, okay, it's a throwing putter. I know it's going to go very straight with maybe a little bit of turn at the end, and I can trust that, and I can throw it like 75% power and get it there. So from all of the field work I've done with it so far and playing some of the holes on my property, I really like it. So we'll see how it goes from here, but maybe it gets beat in and gets a little bit more turn on it, and then I can just throw another new one in there. And then I have kind of like that hand feel thing, and then maybe the inner core's in there for straight utility, like extremely flippy putter, or maybe it just comes out. I don't know.
yeah. Yeah, I definitely think give it time. It is one thing to put an expectation in on a disc of like, oh, it's going to get there,
Mhm.
because like a disc, I did that for you have in your bag still from the same run, or not same run, possibly same run. We'll see. That I put in my bag, and I warn all the listeners. It can get real dicey, being like, oh, this is how I expect this disc to beat in, especially if it's
Mhm.
a new mold that you haven't
Mhm.
used to the point of submission. So it's like if someone were to watch me throw Precious Child with a pig, I would warn you, if you want to make a pig do that, it's probably going to take some time of
Mhm.
keeping that same pig in the bag over and over again. And people are like, well, I just can't get my pig to get to that point. It's a time investment thing. And it's not only a time,
Mhm.
I throw that disc a lot. I threw it way
Mhm.
more before it became Precious Child, which is what got it there. So
Yeah, and I
just,
think
yeah,
that's kind
adjusting.
of where I am. Like, I'm gonna pick the disc to be in my bag because of its like normal, like off the shelf flight is kind of where I want to be. And then if it beats into a point where it can cover two spots, that's awesome. Then I just can keep cycling and keep that process going. If I end up loving the disc in that slot,
Which
so I
is a
think in
good
this building,
caveat.
yeah, and I think it's in a building. I'm in a rebuilding phase, so I need to like just know what I'm grabbing and not just like rely on something may not be able to find or something like that.
Oh, absolutely. And like in a rebuilding phase, it's one thing to be like, oh, I'm in a rebuild phase. By the way, I'm going back. I'm only using discs that I know and I'm super familiar with and all that. It's like, if you're going to rebuild, throw in some on a chance and see if they like actually stick. See if they float around. Yeah, can't encourage that enough. So, what's this new Envy doing for you?
Okay, so it's being an actual Envy, right? It's an overstable throwing putter. Um, it's really funny. I've never done this before, and it's never been an issue. And I don't know what it was this year, but my Eclipse Envies that I usually have in the bag, I'm just taking them out for winter. I'll put them back in the spring, summer. But every time we play a weekly, like when I went to throw my Eclipse Envy, it would slip out of my hand every single time.
Hmm.
I don't know if they're just getting like kind of like beaten and worn out. I don't have a lot of grip to them. I don't know if it's something's changed with my like finger texture. I don't know, but I have like a um, Cosmic Electron Envy here
Okay.
that I'm just really trying to use as a normal Envy. And again, if it beats into the point where it starts to get a little flip to it that I want, then I'm going to cycle in a new one, and then we'll keep that process. Maybe I got the hiccups. The process going. But I'm just really like counting on it to be an Envy because again, in spring or summer, I'm going to throw in another Eclipse one in there, and I want it to still have like a similar like flight.
Yeah. That's fair. Getting used to like making the idea of the flight versus a
Hmm.
particular disc. And plus, then if you end up not liking the shaman and you've got a bunch of envies that are beat in and ready to
Hmm.
go, you could
Right.
end up with like a triple cycle. I feel like almost
Yeah.
of I've got a really beat in one. I have my straight ones. I mean, almost the exact same thing I'm doing with my pigs
Hmm.
of
That's kind of the dream. Like that's
they
kind of where I
launch in.
want to be. But again, I don't have the expectation of doing that. But if that happens, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's people are like, I can't. When I showed my disc collection and I had 60 plus pigs, people were like, that's a little gross, Robbie. And I'm like, yeah,
Hmm.
but I'll go ahead and tell you, probably 10 of them don't fly like a pig that you would expect. They're like, they've already been through the bag and they're in the straight pig box.
Hmm.
And then a couple of those are even closer to Precious Child. So
Hmm.
while there's a lot, it's nice finding a mold you love and you're gonna rock consistently. So to
Hmm.
me, that takes you to the zone.
Yep. So I switched out my other zone for this really sweet one. Um,
Is that
it's
supposed to be
very
like a tiger's
Yeah,
stamp?
yeah. So very cool. I retired the 1,000 rated one to the shelf. It was getting a little like really beat in, and not that I'm like want to collect. I just wanted it to be there and recognizable. To some point, it's getting scratched up and destroyed. So I'm like, we'll keep that as a memory. And I saw this one. I'm like, I gotta have this one. It's beautiful. This one is like as overstable as you expect a zone to be. I haven't been using it for so long, like super long, so it is like still that overstable, reliable zone, which is something. It's a staple to my bag. I don't know that that'll ever change unless I lose it in a challenge or something like that. And then I have another zone that I started using too. This Z Jawbreaker zone.
Ooh,
It's a mist stamp. It has a Pro D stamp on it, which I think is awesome. Um, but it's like really gummy,
yeah.
really flexible. Um, I like it a lot. It's just a little straighter with an
Mm,
overstable finish. So, um, and I just realized that after losing zones during rounds and things like that, or not having them when I'm doing a challenge or something, that I really should probably carry two. And they both do a little bit different things, so I can kind of justify them both being in there.
yeah.
And I know how they fly, but I just want to make sure I have two of those discs in my bag.
Yeah, I mean that's I couldn't agree more. Like if I one of the beauties of having the three zone or the three pigs in my bag is that even Precious Child, at the end of the day, I know how to throw a Precious Child to get it to
Hmm.
still have some pig like tendencies.
Yeah.
So if I'm running a hole and it's like, junk, I
Hmm.
had to throw the disc that I needed to throw on this upshot next to the water was a pig.
Hmm.
You got to step up and you got to throw that zone. You shouldn't be thinking to yourself, I can't throw my zone here because
Hmm.
if I lose it, I know that I throw a zone on four more holes later on in
Hmm.
the course.
Right.
The odds of you shanking that shot in the water drastically increase no matter what disc you're throwing
Hmm.
there. So being able to step up and be like, it's okay. I'm going to throw the disc for
Yeah.
this shot.
Right.
Super reliable. So I love that. Which means the peppermint is also in there for what purpose?
So this is my like extremely overstable approach disc. If I need to flex something out of a sticky situation, I'll even throw this kind of like almost in a really overstable mid range scenario too, because I can throw it as far,
Mm.
and it's just a little deeper than the zone, and it feels a little bit more comfortable to backhand.
Okay.
So it's kind of in there for that. Like it's more of a utility, get out of jail. If I need something very overstable, or if I need to backhand something very and flex something overstable, then that's probably what I want to choose. It's fairly new to the bag, but I'm really liking it so far. I've used it in a couple hairy situations, and it's got me out. So, and again, it feels really good, and I think I- I'm kind of working on both ends of the spectrum. I want those really understable shots, and I also want to be able to work overstable discs too to have that availability. So that's why the peppermint's in there.
Cool. That makes sense. So you said using it on overstable sort of mid-range shots. So then
Hmm.
where's the Quake differentiate itself from the peppermint on those
So
backhand, those overstable shots?
so the Quake for me, here's the Quake. The Quake for me is not as like overstable as I want it to be.
Mm,
It's still overstable, don't get me wrong, but I would do like 5502 maybe for
okay.
me. It's just not that like beef of all beef that I want. If I need that, I'm gonna drop down and throw the peppermint.
Okay.
Which I used to have another disc like out from. I used to have the Nebula, then the Bobcat, and really I wasn't really throwing the Nebula. I was really just throwing the Bobcat, and the Bobcat was kind of beat into the point where it was like straight and then had like this overstable dump at the end to it. And the Quake is more. Um, I can even flex the Quake a little bit, and it doesn't have like this like super overstable dump for me. It has more of like a consistent, reliable dump, like fade out. So that's kind of what I like about it. Like hole number 2 at Timbrook, for example, I'm gonna throw the Quake off the tee, and I'm gonna hang it out right
Mm,
and come around that tree. That's the shot I like to throw there.
yeah.
Um, so with my forehand, I'm either like throwing it way too long or way too short. I haven't quite found like the best forehand attack of that hole yet, but feel really comfortable with the backhand. Um, and before I would kind of like throw the Bobcat like over the tree by the water, and it just kind of hit behind it, just like dump straight in. And the Quake I have to hang out a little more wide because the fade out is a little bit longer, which I can also throw the Quake farther than I could ever throw the Bobcat. So again, I think just kind of learning how to use that disc is still fairly new also.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I agree. That shot is needed. That's to me, that's what the Eclipse reactor is for. Like
Hmm.
I want, and I love what you're saying in terms of the Quake. You're not necessarily looking for that like you need a backhand disc, a backhand mid range that you can throw when you're like, oh, there's some headwind here.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't rely on my hexes, the origin, anything like that in that
Hmm.
scenario. But I do need it to actually travel. So I can't throw
Hmm.
like the peppermint here and just think it's not that
Right.
much of a headwind.
Hmm.
So I can see the beauty of that being a quake. I remind me, have we? I'm sure you have the buzz.
Hmm.
Where do you stand on the buzz? Remind me about that.
I am impartial to the buzz. I used to throw them all the time.
Okay.
I really like the 20-year anniversary buzz, like the with the wasp mold. That one flies awesome. Um, so I mean, I like it. I just don't really have a need for it. I don't think the hexes have kind of bumped out the need for that, unless you see something different.
Yeah, that's the spot. There's two spots on I'll take that back. There's three spots on your bag that I'm like extremely fascinated by.
Okay.
And we're launching into one of them right now, which is you've got an origin and two hexes sitting right next to each other.
Hmm.
What are they? Are they all fighting for a similar spot right now?
No, they're just a little. They fly different for me. I purposely did not adjust how they flew for me. I wanted to be a little bit more pure in that respect, but the Eclipse hex has a little bit of fade for me. So
Okay,
it's kind of
so the white
between.
one is eclipse. Okay,
Yep, that's Eclipse. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for those of you, if you're looking at my bag on the screen, it's going to have the actual discs when you're seeing it. For mine and Robbie's purpose, I just threw them in so we could talk about them. Yeah, the white one's Eclipse, so it's a little bit has a little bit of fade at the end. The fission is just pretty straight, just in general. It just goes very straight for a long time. Maybe has a little finish depending on how I throw it. And then the origin has more turn for me than the fission hex.
Yeah.
So they're really kind of like all in that middle spot. Eclipse is a little more overstable. New Fission's straight. Origin is like more understable, has more turn to it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's when I had an Eclipse Hex in my
Mm-hmm.
bag fighting for and really the same spot that you got it.
Mm-hmm.
In that, like, okay, it's going to hold straight, but the Eclipse Hex is still going to have some finish on it at the end. May not be a ton of finish, but it's going to have some finish on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had, instead of a Quake, I had an Eclipse Reactor. And then, so I ended up having just one Eclipse Reactor in there, two hexes, and then an origin on the like far side. So very similar setup to where you're at. I just didn't have the uplink in there.
Mm-hmm.
Because we know what the uplink's doing for you, and I think it's still really necessary to have. But so like I had that spread, and then the more that I kept throwing that Eclipse Hex, it was like, okay, this thing is one solid tree hit for me away from becoming eerily close to the other hex and just flying super, super straight. And that was what I found is the more power and stuff I was putting on it as I was gaining distance with the Eclipse X, it was like, okay. And I remember if for Birmingham locals, there's a course called George Ward, it's hole 13. You're thrown over a creek. It's like it runs right down the middle of the fairway. And so the play is you can either run down the left side of the creek and sort of crash over, which is you got to have an arm like a cannon and a really overstable disc to do that, or you can throw kind of immediately over the creek and then let it slow fade out, but you can't go too overstable because you'll crash into the creek. So I was like, oh, perfect. I'm just going to throw a soft Eclipse Hex on this line and just let it boop fly straight and then crash. And sure enough, it did the first half. And I threw it and it went really straight. And I was like, if I'm in a tournament, this is I'm flirting with the line too much. So that's where I would look at. I would wonder, because how long has it been since you threw an Eclipse Reactor? Have you ever thrown the reactor, first off?
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah, because I'd be curious for you to throw an Eclipse Reactor alongside the Quake and then throw a Fission Reactor alongside your Eclipse Hex. And just be like, now granted, that's sometimes people, I myself included, can try to over mold minimalize. And if the Quake's like, if you're loving the Quake and you're throwing the Quake, then I think it stands there. But if it's not cemented already, now's the time to test it against something kind of a deal, which could clear up that space on the hexes. But I agree. If you've got your hexes doing that, the buzz is unnecessary.
Yeah, and again, the Origin's still a fairly new addition, but it's doing exactly what I want it to do, which is I can throw it hard and it like just slowly turns, which is, and this one's sweet, just has a bar stamp on it.
Yeah.
And then my uplink, yeah, everyone I think knows what that is. That's an easy flip up turnover shot. My very sweet Sacred Heart Hospital one died by a fan. Thank you so much for that. So yeah, that's just the uplink's a staple in my bag in the way that the zone is.
Yeah.
And the envy,
Yeah. What I would be curious is if you were to test some competition against either your like Eclipse Hex or your Quake, I would encourage you to take the Fission Hex out of your bag so that you just have the Origin in there. So it will beat in, because your Eclipse Hex has some wear and tear to it because your Fission Hex, sorry, has some wear and tear to it because I think people expect a Fission Hex off the shelf to just be like laser straight, and that takes time. Like, unless you have like 160 gram hex,
yeah, and I'm just now seeing that. To be fair, I'm just now seeing that very straight flight, and I mean, you can see it. It's got some beat upness to it.
Yeah, Oh, I that was one. That run was very early on this year. I want to say because
Hmm.
I remember that being like around when I came in,
Hmm.
and like one of the first care packages I got
Yeah,
had
it's been for a while.
that
It's
Vision
been out for
Hex
a
in
while.
there. So, but just letting that origin beat in to just give yourself a little more
Hmm.
clarity
Yeah.
on, because I'm sure, and now that you're seeing that straight flight out of the Hex and you have a newer origin,
Yeah.
just the difference between a little bit of Hyzer in the origin or a little maybe baby Annie on the Hex,
Hmm.
same flight,
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
but still probably a pretty sizable gap, I would guess, between the origin and the uplink.
Hmm. Yeah, there's the uplink's very it's its own island over there.
Yeah. And I know that the Origin's trying to replace the Lobster.
Correct.
So it will with some time. I mean,
Hmm.
I've heard Nate now mention it outside of like, I spoiled y'all with that one Origin because it was
Hmm.
like, this is what they can be.
Yeah. I know. I saw it and I'm just like, man, I've got to get one in my hand and just start throwing it at some trees to get it to that point.
Yeah. So moving on to the fairways, this is spot number 2 that I'm like, this looks fascinating to me.
Hmm.
And I'm sure there are some differences, but what's going on in this FD Leopard 3 Mockingbird party?
All right. This is a mess right now. Okay.
At
Let's
least,
just call
hey, acknowledgement is the first step.
yeah. Here are the things that are, and again, for me, I treat like everything from 9 to 7 kind of in the same line, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, Sexton Firebird is a new addition. One came in like kind of warped
Wow.
from
Oh, is that this year's run? Yeah.
yeah. One came kind of warped and had like a dent in it from Innova. So I'm like, oh, I'll use this one instead of throwing it in the used bin. And I needed something like very overstable
Yeah.
in the fairway category. Again, I don't use it a ton, but I needed that like very like super beefy disc to use. Um, so like that kind of came in. That makes sense. The Evader, which is a new addition. Again, there's like a you can see like a chasm kind of around it, but it covers a lot of gaps for me. I can throw it flat, and it has like that just like consistent kind of hyzer the whole time, like slow hyzer the whole time, which is nice. I can flex it a little bit. It will come back if I flex it. If I don't give it too much Annie, and if I need like a big like just hyzer like that boomerang like or rainbow type shot, like the Evader is going to do that for me. So it's been really kind to me so far.
Okay.
And this is like kind of a clone of the one I threw for that the in the bag episode. After I threw it for that guest, I was like, man, I've got to find that
Gotta have it,
exact
baby.
it. I even like felt them. I'm like, okay, this one has like enough spring. It feels like that one. So uh that's been really nice. Now the FDs, the FDs are like the staples. So they belong there. They're that like very neutral disc. I mean, they go pretty straight. Like this FD I've had for a while. It's
Okay.
it's pretty beaten, so it'll actually turn a little bit and come back to straight, which is kind of funny. And this
Yeah.
FD is a an Innova FD. So just in our
Okay.
from our U section.
I was like, tell
Um,
us you're flexing on us, Brad, without
yeah.
telling us you're flexing on us.
But yeah, I just came in and it flies amazing. It's maybe just like a little bit more, like a touch more understable. Um,
Okay.
it's like it's 169, so it's a little lighter, and then it like is just kind of beat in. So, but both of these I make sure I release on like Hyzer because they will flip up. If I don't, they will turn on me. But I feel like I get like a ton of distance. Like they're probably my like started sorry to talk about Timbrook. We've just played it a lot recently.
Yeah.
Um, Not hole one. Like I'm throwing the FD, my orange FD on Hyzer. It'll flip up and actually turn a little bit in that gap, and then kind of like fall into the hillside pretty straight, like in line with the basket. That's like my shot choice there. Um, the yellow one I honestly don't throw that much, but it's kind of the same situation as like the zone. Like this one's a little like flippier than the orange one,
Mm.
but I don't feel like if I lose my orange one, which I did lose my orange one during the round at Ivy Hill, I didn't have like a backup.
Mm.
So I wanted to make sure I had I just want a backup of that disc. That's why
Yeah.
the only reason it's there. Okay. Mocking Leopard 3, Halo, it's a Halo Leopard 3. Mockingbird and Diamond. These Mockingbird has been in my bag for a while. It's the Americall one with like the headband.
America.
Yeah. Which is just honestly the main reason I started throwing, because I think it's amazing. Like
Yeah.
the stamp's amazing and everything.
Fantastic stamp. Well played.
It flew really well for me for a long time. But like when I started throwing the S line FDs, like it kind of, I don't throw it that much anymore, because I think, I don't know why, in my head it was a faster disc, and when I put it in here, I'm like, oh well, that's stupid. No wonder I don't throw it anymore. It feels like a little faster. It's a little domier, and I used to be able to like throw it extremely far, and it'd have like this nice like flex line, but it's like really flippy now that I've used it a bunch, and I don't know how it got so like flippy on me. It will not come back. Like even if I throw it on a little hyzer, it'll flip up, go straight, and just won't come back. It won't fade. So full disclosure, this may not be in the bag much past this episode. Now, kind of like seeing it, but that's what I would often throw it in a spot where I'm like, okay, this is more of like a distance driver or control driver shot. That's when I would used to throw it.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, okay, I'm either doing FD or I'm going like to like the Vulture.
Okay.
Like I'm not like choosing it really at all anymore. So it's interesting that it's still in there. The Halo FD, or I'm sorry, Halo Leopard 3, which is one of the Christmas ones. I just started throwing it and I just fell in love with this disc. It is not like what I expected the Leopard 3 to be, but kind of in a good way.
Yeah.
This like is very Jackalope-esque. Like almost like what I wanted the Jackalope to be off the shelf. So I've been throwing it in love. I can throw this disc so far, like so far. And it's on Hyzer, it'll flip up. And again, the flight numbers don't really make me feel like I should do this, but it flips up, goes really straight. It will even turn a little bit, maybe, depending on how I release it, but it will have some fade at the end, like a little bit. And not the FDs will, I can't guarantee on that fade at the end. They probably won't. If they fade, they just kind of come back to center. They don't like fade into like the overstable category. This one it has like a little dump to it. I can't figure it out. I don't know how a disc is understable or flippy with
hard finish
at the very end.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like I'm gonna throw this disc some more. It's a new edition, but it will turn more, but it like has an overstable finish. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I'll be curious how long it retains both.
Yeah.
Like I would assume that the fade will be the first thing to go, rather than it just turning even more, kind of a deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I think that water right now, it doesn't sound like it's that muddy, because it actually, if on the chart, the Leopard 3 is like on the more understable side of the FDs, but it sounds like in reality they would be flipped.
Yeah, kind of. And yeah, and then the Mockingbird is just kind of there, but I don't really throw it a whole lot anymore, so it's probably just going to come out, if I'm being honest. And then the Diamond's in there just because, again, the Diamond is just so fun to throw. It's the uplink of my fairways.
Yeah.
Like it's utility. If I need like that huge like left to right shot and I can throw it nose up and just have like a beautiful like turning shot, then I can throw the Diamond all day on that.
Yeah, I think that is wise and it fits. And especially I like that you're identifying the most times that you would want that Flight of the Mockingbird, you probably can finesse something else to do that, or just lean into the easiness of the Diamond and get get expected shots, rather than like, okay, so the Mockingbird, I can't throw it here because then it's going to roll. But if I throw it on too much hyzer, it's not going to get up and move right enough, kind of a deal. Those are the trap discs, guys. When a disc is coming out and you're using it less and less, not only because you found other discs, but because you're like, it is so finicky for me to be able to hit this well. It's when it needs to leave the bag. The Wraith that left my bag, the Team Stamp Wraith that left my bag, was that way. Like if I hit it perfectly, farthest flying disc in my bag, and it's not even close. That thing flew so far. But most of the time, I was either having to throw it on so much Hyzer that it barely stood up, or too much, not enough Hyzer, and then it's just burning over and rolling. So I'm here for that. Now, lift. I'm guessing the lift is going to work in more with your army of vultures.
Yeah, and honestly, the lift is exclusively forehand.
Okay.
It is like my go-to like forehand disc if I need distance for the time being. And yeah, I don't really throw it on backhand. There's no reason. I just don't. So that is something I'm going to start using because, again, theoretically, it should fit like nicely on the right side of my vultures, right?
Yeah.
So, I should be able to just flip it up, go straight with a little bit of finish. It should be the FD of my like distance drivers, really. Because again, I know it's a 9-speed, but I throw it more like a distance driver. That's when I'm picking it.
Yeah.
For like a forehand, so it feels a little bit more like a wider rim distance driver, like a control driver.
Okay. So what do the vultures do? Because I know one of these is not actually it is a vulture, but it's not really a vulture.
Yeah, this is my flippy vulture. Like it will flip up, to the point where like if I throw it on Annie now, it doesn't come back very hard.
Okay.
So, so that's kind of what that one does. So it's kind of, if you are looking at the chart, like the lift is on the right side there. That vulture is probably like 10.5, 0.5 or 1, maybe.
That's yellow vulture for those of you who are coming back, checking out RPM afterwards.
Pink vulture is, Connor gave this to me.
Oh.
So I put it in there. Little disc, our disc swap we did for Christmas. It's a little bit more overstable than the yellow one I just mentioned, but it's not like fully overstable like a brand new vulture.
Okay.
I think like that Z jawbreaker kind of gives it, which is consistent with the zone. It's like a little straighter.
Yeah.
So like it's like just the next step in stability from that first yellow vulture, and this one is a brand new like neon green. It just was really fun, and I needed a vulture that was like pretty overstable.
So that actually was a vulture.
Yeah, right. Something that's actually a vulture. So that's what that is. So it's like almost unrecognizable vulture, like straighter vulture, and then actual vulture.
Has there been a moment, and the stamps are quite different, so probably not, but has there been a moment, because in my eye, the yellow vulture and that green vulture look very similar, at least in the lighting you just showed. Have you had a moment yet where you just weren't thinking and you were chatting and you went to go throw one vulture and you had accidentally grabbed the other one?
Yeah, it's funny. They are very different colors. One's like very lime green. The other one's very like muted yellow. But I did grab I didn't throw it, but I grabbed it, and I was like, what is going on? And I'm like, oh, this is the wrong vulture.
Yeah.
So I did do that. And it's funny, the Z jawbreaker and obviously the Z feel very similar, and I went to reach for them again, didn't pull it out. I'm like, oh, that's not right. It's really funny how you can also tell, like, theoretically a vulture's a vulture, right? But if someone handed me both of these, I'm like, oh, that's the yellow one, that's the green one, that's the pink one.
Yeah.
Like they have a different feel to them. But it was funny. I did go up to the tee with that lime green one. I'm like, oh nope, that's gonna be bad. It was hole 16 at Timbrook where I needed to I need that
go
like
wide
turn
and crash,
wide and come. That one would have just been awful.
Yeah, no, when I added the Raiders in, I had an old Raider that was flippy when I was throwing them 2 years ago. So I was like, I have no idea how this is going to be now. Then I've added more power, and I put another one in there that was also red. So I had like a new Raider that was red and my flippy Raider that was red.
Yeah.
And the only difference was one had Sharingan dyed on it, one had Darth Maul dyed on it. And thankfully, Dakota helped me out with that problem and threw Darth Maul into the middle of the lake. So don't have to worry about that anymore. But absolutely, like, I had stepped up multiple times and been like, nope, that would have been horrific. Or like on both sides, like one where I wanted the movement and I grabbed the overstable one, or when I wanted, literally, there's a water feature and I was like, I just need to go straight and then crash.
Yeah, that's funny.
So.
Yeah, and that I don't necessarily love orange and yellow per se as like a human, but I tend to like alternate those colors as like a reminder to me, like, oh hey, this is a disc you need to pay attention to, and also like I don't hey, you can find this a little easier.
Unless you're throwing orange in Virginia, because you guys
Yeah.
get some leaves like nobody's business.
Yeah, and that's why I can't decide. I'm like, why is like some of my most thrown discs, why are they orange? That makes no sense.
Yeah. I mean, I remember doing that ace challenge with Connor where he got the double skip ace, and
Mm-hmm.
we spent more time looking for Connor's disc between holes than anyone else's because
Yep.
half his discs are orange. And we're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
all right, we got to find these. What a time. What
Mm-hmm.
a time. So, listeners, let us know what's your like. I'm sure we've got someone who bags the all pink bag and the all blue
Mm-hmm.
bag because I feel like those are two classics.
Yep.
But let us know. So last disc in the bag is the Zeus. What's the Zeus doing?
Okay. So this is a ESP Jawbreaker Zeus.
What a good plastic blend.
Oh, that's why it started. I actually got this from my wife who throws Zeus's. She's primary forehand player. So she'll flex Zeus's quite often. And she was like, I don't really like it. It's a little flippy. I'm like, wait, what? A Zeus?
Yeah.
And I just went again in my yard one day. I was like, oh, let me just see this. And I can just I can throw this thing so far. I think it's because I feel like this plastic is a perfect blend of like gummy, flexible, but still has some rigidity to it. And I
Okay.
think I feel like I can dig my thumb into it, which is not something I typically do a lot.
Mm,
And like, man, I can rip this thing and it will flip up and go straight for me for a long time.
okay.
And I also love to forehand this disc. If I'm throwing like a big, if I don't know, it just seems if I need to throw something on like, because my lift, I do have to be careful that I don't turn it too much
Mm,
on forehand. I have to throw with like an appropriate like amount of hyzer. Like this Zeus for whatever reason, I just feel like I can just kill it like on a baby hyzer, and it'll just kind of have that big sweeping like fade the entire time. My brother-in-law has a course at his house that we put in, and there's this one shot that you throw. I mean, it's probably only like a 350-foot straight line,
yeah.
but you have to throw it around this barn actually. And I just tried it one day. I'm like, I don't know. I threw my lift and I didn't do a great job, and then I threw like the quake on the other side, and I was still like, I don't know, 50, 60 feet out. And you have to like there's like a stone wall on one side that you can't be on. You got to go around the other side. So I messed up that one. I'm like, oh, we're practicing, why not? And I just chucked this on forehand. I threw it like 30 feet past the basket.
Come on.
Now, I'm not saying I can do that every time, just for whatever reason. Again, I feel like I can dig into this disc.
Yeah.
So it's really in there to like kind of like experiment with a faster disc. I'm like, am I ready for some faster discs or not?
Mm,
I don't know. Now, if I'm playing around, am I like pulling this disc out to throw it? Probably 9 out of 10, no.
yeah.
There's no real reason for me to throw a disc I'm still working on, but it's in there as like a transition disc. Like, hey, is there a world where I'm in this? Can I start throwing these discs now?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
They have leaned into putting Jawbreaker in everything. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that was the story of the last half of 2023 for them.
Mm-hmm.
But that plastic, y'all. I don't know if it dropped anywhere other than USDGC. The ESP Jawbreaker.
I
Like
don't
I
know.
don't. They may have had it available on the website, but I know that they cooked them up for USDGC.
Mm-hmm.
And y'all, I've got a ESP Jawbreaker Passion.
Mm-hmm.
And the hard part is I love that plastic so much. And I've now thrown 3 different passions. Funny enough, have never thrown like a stock ESP passion.
Mm-hmm.
But I've thrown 3 random plastics, and that one feels so good. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that is my passion. That is
Yeah.
what I lean into. And I just wish more people, because I'll go be around people that have passions and I'll show them that one and they're like, whoa, where can I get these? Unfortunately, nowhere.
You can't.
So Discraft, we need you to ramp up because it's a beautiful blend that flies so good.
Yeah.
So good. So I can
It's
completely see
amazing.
that. Yes. Overall, looking at the bag, Brad, I feel like you've got the places that you have the most overlap. You're very aware that it is overlap.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. The challenge is going to be just like actually fixing it versus, oh yeah, I know how these have overlap. And then we do this episode 2 months from now and nothing's changed.
Right. Yeah, that is going to be the hard part. And as I'm stacking these discs up right now, I put the Mockingbird to the side. It's not going back in. It's
I
coming
love
out.
it.
Just because, again, I like the Mockingbird, but I like the FD more, and it's just really there's just a lot of overlap right there.
Yeah.
It's just not something I need in my life right now.
So
So yeah, I mean, I think this is my bag start for this year, and again, the Mockingbird's a great point. I'm going to continue to watch the Envy Shaman Inner Core like flow and just see, because that's not a slot. Those like throwing putters, I really love throwing putters and mid ranges, and there's been some flow there, and I'd really like to solidify those, like because I want to like that part of my game to feel really good.
yeah.
Again, Envy is always going to be. I feel good with the Envy. And it's just really that shaman inner core slot. Like, what is going to stay? Is it just going to be all envies and varying degrees of envy since I'm going to be playing more and trying to get better? Maybe I have an easier time beating in envies, and that's just what that's going to be, and I'm fine with that. Same with the hex origin slots. Like, that's something I'm pretty confident in what it is now, but like, I probably can get more confident. I'd like to lock in that like 5 speed and under for the rest of the year, like soon. It's hard to do, I think, in winter a little bit because things are going to be a little different once it starts getting a little warmer. But I
Yeah.
would really like to lock that in, and then really, it's just like my drivers. I got to figure out just all the way around. I mean, I have a good a good format for what I want and a good like start, but I think I'm gonna predict a lot of change there. Probably some more like um simplification, if I had to guess.
Yeah. And speaking of change, when you go to switch these out, you're going to have somewhere to store this Mockingbird
Mm-hmm.
that's not making it in the bag. These envies got to be stored somewhere, which keys us into our wonderful sponsor of What's New in the Warehouse, which is Hyzer Disc Racks. We are so grateful to them for the support that they've continued to show us.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all, I'm just saying, as I have gone through this season in January where I'm sorting things out in my bag as well. It is so convenient having these Hyzer disc racks where I can have everything laid out in front of me. I've got trial sections. I have storage sections. It's like, I put out a story today talking about, hey, I'm going to run something against the zone.
Mm-hmm.
All my overstable punt approach options are sitting right in front of me on the Hyzer disc rack, beautifully displayed. So my wife's happy.
Yep.
But also so convenient for me because, man, it's a bummer when you have a great collection and you're looking for that disc.
Yeah.
And you can't find it.
Right. Yeah. So thanks, Shannon. Hey, Hyzer Disc Racks, 1-person team, Illinois. Shannon's like an avid disc golfer. When we started talking about this partnership a while back, he's like, I love disc golf. I just love being a part of it. I love helping out players and helping out folks. And if you pay attention, a lot of pros are using Hyzer disc racks. We're big fans of Hyzer disc racks here, and it is a little bit of an investment, but that's okay. These things are precision made. They're packaged beautifully. They're a piece of furniture, and it's all made in the U.S. Everything, and it's all handcrafted. He goes and picks them up himself. He has a manufacturer right down the road from him that makes them for him. So,
It's incredible.
yeah, he's got some new stuff coming out. It's not out yet, but for in the bag listeners, Shannon, he doesn't do this a ton, like very often, but he has activated a discount code for you. So you can, off your entire order, you can get 10% off if you use the code in the bag. So make sure you use in the bag code. Again, these things are modular. So like if you don't have the budget to like buy 30 of them right now, that's okay. Buy one, buy a couple at a time, whatever you need to do to start your collection. They look good as one, they look good as four. That's completely up to you, but make sure you use code in the bag. Thank you to all of you who have purchased them so far. We've seen a few of you post yours, so thank you so much for that. And thanks, Shannon and Hyzer Disc Racks. Check out the link in the description.
So, Brad, what's new? What can they go to foundationdisc.com and find? What's new in the warehouse?
Hey, we're starting to crank out some new stuff. The biggest thing here that we're releasing this week is we have some brand new. I'm calling them retro stamped. The Foundation Mountain stamp on some MVP. So we have
Come on.
Prism Pyros, we have Neutron Hexes, which is going to make my hex situation worse because I'm going to put one of those in. So I'm going to have a Fission, Eclipse,
Oh,
and
baby.
Neutron. and uh, Foundation Mountain Stamp time lapses and watts. So we got all the bases covered there. So make sure you check those out this weekend. I would advise get there quick. If you're listening to this episode, you probably already missed them, and I'm sorry. But still go check anyway. Our Spotify, Apple Podcast listeners, it's 5:00 right now. Boom, pause, go pick you up some.
Yeah.
So, also new Tour Life merch and new Grip Lock merch is live. Make
Yeah.
sure you check that out. Hey, not to spoil behind the scenes here, but the guys are in a little bit of competition with each other. Tour Life and Grip Lock are in a little bit of competition. So go support those. There's hats, there's t-shirts, there's sweatshirts, there's hoodies. All really cool. And if you haven't seen the new Grip Lock design, logo design, that's what's on all this merch. So make sure you check it out. Tour Life merch, Grip Lock merch is new. The custom MVP, no matter what, whether you're wearing it on your body or you're putting it in your bag, make sure it's good, and we will see you all next week.